welcome to We Got a podcast normally about Dragon Ball. From Nerve to Casper to Asuka, we're going to cover it all. My name's Ken.
And I'm Randy. I didn't think of a fun name. I really should have.
No special thing. Oh, could the viewers? It's what they demand.
Oh, man. I don't know. I'm First Children Randy.
First, there you go. That's good. So you're like the reincarnation of who? Which, just pick any god or biblical figure.
Yeah, it's true.
We're good.
Kronos.
Okay, I don't even know.
Not biblical, but, you know.
Not biblical, yeah. So this podcast originated with Randy and I both. We talk about on the podcast, our normal Dragon Ball podcast that we do, how our Dragon Ball is our favorite franchise in the world, right? But I think if you were to pin me down and say, what is your favorite anime? I'm saying it's Neon Genesis Evangelion.
And I would have to completely agree.
Yeah, I think wholesale Dragon Ball has more to love to it. But I think if you're talking about like it's just a singular product and then the several movies that follow afterwards, I think that all as a collective is like pure potency, my favorite anime.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
minute to minute, like if you condensed it, distilled this anime, like there's just so much in there. So much to grab onto and enjoy and digest and think about.
So about a month ago, G-Kids put out the Blu-ray version of Evangelion Rebuild 3.0 plus 1.01 Thrice Upon a Time, I believe is the title. We'll get to it later. And so Randy and I were both kind of, I don't know if we both had the idea to go through all the movies again, but at some point along the line, it was suggested. And then it was like, hey, let's do it together. And then Randy's like, you want to do it in VR? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to watch a whole movie in VR, but we can go at the same pace, watch these movies together and then talk about them. And then the other day I was like, hey, I was about to watch End of Eva. We've already watched Death True Squared by that point. And then it was like, hey, let's record something and go through these movies talking about them. So that leads us to here. So we have watched Death True Squared, or is it Death True 2?
I think it's supposed to be squared, but also the N2 mines are superscript, but they never say squared.
And the S2 engine as well is also that. So
that's
we are
right.
in quite a predicament here.
I'm going to say 2. I've always called it Death True 2.
Death True 2, because it rhymes. It's like poetry.
Mm-hmm.
So we have watched that, and we have watched the end of Evangelion, which is an alternate retelling of episodes. So Death True 2, to back it up just a second, is a retelling of episodes 1 through 24 of Neon Genesis Evangelion with added material that was later put into what are known as the director's cuts of episodes 21 through 24. So if you just watch 1 through 24. Basically, I don't know if on Netflix you can even watch the non-director's cuts episodes or if those are on the Blu-ray or not, which I have right here.
The on-air versions were not on Netflix, and I believe one of the editions, I have the big box, the big boy box that G-Kids put out. I think that came with the on-air versions.
It's nice to have access to that kind of stuff, but really there's no reason to not watch the director's cut episode. So
unless you have nostalgia for the old ADV dub, in which case they did both the director's cuts and the originals, but there were some actors that changed in between. So Kaoru had a different actor. Gendo had a different one. Yeah. So
always hate it when that kind of stuff happens, but
exactly.
It does. So Death True 2 is a retelling of those, kind of not a retelling in the way that you would expect, but almost more of a character-based retelling, going through each character's journey in that show separately and in concurrence of which child they are. That's not even true either, but it's separately. They go through their stories. And then the end of Evangelion is an alternate telling of what happens in episodes 25 and 26 of the anime, which are internalized from Shinji's point of view. And in the end of Evangelion, you see everything that led up directly to that point, and then what is actually going on as that's all happening, as well as some internal stuff as well. They kind of
course,
doesn't exactly connect to what's happening in those episodes. And if I'm being honest, Randy, I don't know if I ever want to watch those episodes again. I think I'll just watch the end of Evangelion instead.
Interesting, because I will pipe up and say I really love 25 and 26 of the original TV series. They're so experimental.
Yes, that's true.
And different, and I don't know, like as much as I enjoy what End of Evangelion can give me, I don't get the same emotional feeling I do as at the end of 26, where I like, I'm clapping along. I get a little choked up and I feel very happy.
It's funny because 26, the TV show, has a much happier ending than the end of 26, the End of Evangelion version. So, So let's go ahead and get into it with Death True 2, Randy. So what is your exposure to this retelling of the series? How many times have you seen it before, and what's your history with it?
So I seen it, I would say a good handful of times. I bought the old Manga Entertainment DVD. Geez, this probably would have been circa 2003, 2004. And I had that was packaged Death and Rebirth, which Rebirth is a whole different thing, which was actually the first 25 or so minutes of End of Evangelion that's the stuff they had finished, but it wasn't ready on time. So they're like, here's a preview. Catch End of Evangelion next year. So I had seen that quite a number of times. And it's interesting. There's 3 different cuts of Death, the recap movie. There was the original Death that was alongside Rebirth in theaters. And then there was another cut that the director had done solo, apparently, so is claimed, that was aired on television that had to have some of the extra footage cut to meet a certain runtime. And that was called Death True. And then recut again, putting that extra footage back in, some changes here or there that no longer had to confine to it, that was re-put in theaters under this event called the Revival of Evangelion, where they had Death True 2 and End of Evangelion back there. So apparently Death True 2 is the only one that's used for home video releases. So it was never advertised as that on the DVD that I had gotten, but apparently that's the one that I had watched a bunch, which is weird. I had not watched it, goodness, probably close to 20 years now. So when I watched it again this past week, it just felt different to me, but maybe that's just time. So what about you?
So I had not ever seen Death True 2 until it aired, until they put everything on Netflix. And because in the past, I watched the series via my friend's DVD set that he had, the rare platinum ADV set of Eva. So I watched those. And then he
didn't
also
come in until late.
Yeah.
With the platinum editions. Okay.
Yeah. I was in college when I first watched Eva. And it was like, it seems like a good age to be consuming this series, I think. Although I think as an adult, I'm much better able to appreciate it. And it's more my speed nowadays, especially with everything they're throwing at me. And the way that we have wikis, the way that we did not have them when I was in college, to date myself here a little bit. I think Wikipedia was very young at that point, like maybe 3 or 4 years old, but the individual wikis hadn't really taken off yet. So I did not watch this until it was out on Netflix, and I was just curious, so I checked it out, and I love it. I love what's the word for it? Not necessarily. I love narratives that are all over the place.
Okay,
there's a specific phrase for that I'm losing here, but that's what this is. You could never recommend to someone watch Death True 2 as like your first exposure to Eva. Watch this in place of these episodes. I think if you want to watch something as a refresher before watching End of Eva, I think it's perfectly cromulent to do that. But to watch this by itself without any kind of foreknowledge of what goes on in this series, you're going to be incredibly lost because it is jumping all through time. You're not going to know what the Katsuragi expedition was, which is how this thing opens up. They're showing you like Shinji's mom, and you're not going to know who she is. You're barely going to know who Fuyutsuki is because they just show him and all of a sudden he's there and they don't explain what's going on or what his relationship to Gendo is or anything like that. So but I love it because it's just non-linear storytelling is what I was looking for, Randy. And that is some of my favorite storytelling I'm finding as I get older, and just, like get me from point A to point B has kind of become a rote, boring way to tell a story. So to be able to jump through Eva in a way that's character focused instead of necessarily plot focused. Is this replaced a series for me? No, of course not. But if I want to watch End of Eva, but not go into End of Eva totally blind, of course I'm going to watch Death True 2 again.
I had the experience of watching this again, like I said, for the first time in near 20 years. And I knew that it was going to be a nonlinear story where we're focusing it on characters more so rather than plot narrative sequence. And I got to say, I didn't like it. Which I hate to say, but the problem I had was I just actually rewatched Evangelion this past spring. I did 1 through 24, and then I did this fan edit that somebody had done called Concurrence of Evangelion, where they took TV 25-26 and mixed it in with End of Evangelion. So then I skipped doing death and all of that, but seeing this again, I was kind of like, this is kind of all over the place. And I wasn't really, I don't know, I just didn't appreciate the editing and how things were handled. And I felt like, okay, I'm pretty familiar with this show. And if I came to this, like say it had been a year, like, had been about 6 months or so. Granted, I know a lot of this stuff, and I'm like, I feel like this is just so badly put together that it doesn't do a good enough service to anybody who like maybe got dragged along by a friend of like, you got to see this thing. You haven't seen the show. Like you had said, not a replacement for the TV show. And I don't think it does a very good job at catching you up on the plot before jumping into End of Evangelion. What it does do is it certainly sets a mood and a tone for like how this story is told and just like the complexities of it. So, I mean, I guess it kind of functions as the opening of an anime where it's like, okay, I got to listen to the song. I got to get in the headspace for this thing I'm about to watch. And that it doesn't really accomplish much in terms of conveying plot to you, but it does get you in that mood for what's coming next.
Yeah, it's a tone piece to get you ready. Yeah. And but that's what I like about it. It reminds me of everything that happened in the series. So like they even keep in the full elevator scene with Rei and Asuka, and they keep in the full scene of Shinji Unit 1 holding Kaoru. And I was watching this, so to say that this is not a great way to have someone experience Eva for the first time, boy, my wife was watching this with me and was extremely lost. Suffice it to say, she did not enjoy watching End of Eva with me either, so do not show Death True 2. I mean, she's seen stuff before, and she knows a little bit here and there, but there's a sticker we saw in someone's car that was Rei, and you walk past it, it's lenticular, and so it turned into Asuka as you walk past it, and she knew the names Rei and Asuka, so it's not like she's totally outside of the world of Eva, but sure, she was like, "What the hell is this?" And I don't blame her. This is not. Don't start with this.
No, so not a great idea.
If you're listening to this podcast and you're like, boy, I like listening to them talk about GT for months and months on end, let me check out them talk about Eva, and then I'll watch Death True 2 because I've never seen Eva before. Don't do it. You got to watch the show. You got to watch the show.
And I think you'll have a very rich experience doing that. 24 episodes is not a big ask, I don't think, especially compared to something like Dragon Ball. GT is 64 episodes. Z is 291. Like, 24 is a drop in the bucket. Yeah.
And as much as I would hate to say stop watching this right now, if you haven't seen End of Eva, you should, because we're going to get into full spoilers for End of Eva. But before we do that, Randy, a lot of people say that Eva is a confusing story.
I can understand that for sure.
I would say it's conveyed in a confusing manner because you are seeing the whole story from the viewpoints of characters who don't necessarily know what's going on. Yeah, and so that's the way that stuff is portrayed to you. But the actual story of what's happening in Eva is convoluted, but I wouldn't say that it's confusing. So I thought maybe we would take a break here before we get into End of Eva and kind of go through what the whole story of Eva is. Now, if you're watching this or listening to it on Spotify, then you may be like, well, I was confused going through the series and I thought I had a good idea of what's going on. And that's because the series doesn't tell you everything. They hint at stuff, but a lot of the Eva Absolute lore comes from a video game known as...
Which
Yes?
can be debated about how much you want to put stock into it, because, supplemental material was not done by the director or writer of the original series, although we're consulted, obviously. But just wanted to throw that out there.
Some of this stuff was in the planning documents as well when they were going through the series. So even though they don't tell you up front that Adam and Lilith are aliens, that was in their mind as they were going through things. There's a reason that they talk about the two moons, the black moon and the white moon. Those have backstories with the creators, even if they are not explicitly stated within the series. So what Neon Genesis Evangelion does is it had for the PlayStation 2. It's a sequel game. It has a section in it called Classified Information, which I don't know, Randy, if this is stuff that you unlock as you go through the game and it slowly tells you more and more, but they have different tiers of classification levels for all sorts of different terminology. If you ever played MGS4 at the time when it came out on PS3, there was with it a separate app you could download, which was like a wiki for MGS3. And so that would have extra stuff. They talk in that about how there was a character in Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops, which canonicity in that game is debated, but there's a character in that game, Cobra or some snake-like name he has. I don't remember. I never beat that one. But he can do what's called zero shifting, which is something that is done in Zone of the Enders. And they explicitly say that he is doing this, hinting that Metal Gear is the same universe as Zone of the Enders. So it's stuff like that. So you take stuff that would contradict the original work, you take that with a grain of salt. But then everything else you kind of, hey, this does make everything make more sense. So 4.6 billion years ago.
All right. We're really starting from the beginning.
Yeah, billions of years ago, you have this group of aliens called the First Ancestral Race. Okay? And they leave their homeworld because their homeworld is about to Krypton, right? It's gone. So they're leaving their homeworld. And the way that they're leaving their homeworld is in 7 things called seeds of life. And they take their entire species and they split them up into 7. And then there is like one driving soul in each of the 7 seeds of life. And then everyone else has kind of been given up their bodies and entered the chambers of Guff, and we'll get into that later, of these seeds, and they're going to shoot off into space and basically reincarnate on new planets. Are you with me, Randy?
Oh, I'm 100%
You're with
you.
me.
Yes.
Along with these seeds of life, they have attached things called the Spear of Longinus, which if all of a sudden you're getting a tickle, that might sound familiar. This is a very biblical series. This is a very series steeped in borrowing terminology and ideations of Judaic lore, Abrahamic lore. So, yeah, they're going to borrow a lot of names. Like Guff is a Hebrew word meaning body. So there's multiple levels to this parfait, right?
Of course.
So some of the seeds carry the fruit of life, some are the fruit of knowledge, but they all have the Spear of Longinus in them, so that if accidentally 2 seeds land on the same planet, a Spear of Longinus will activate and one of the seeds will basically become inert so that only one seed propagates across the planet. It's never really explained why they had to do that, just that it's a thing that's in there. Also,
in their infinite wisdom, they figured this is the best fail-safe system, have a spear, and it does things on its own, which I guess is good to know for certain things that happen in the TV series.
Included with these seeds of life is something called the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is a real thing. But in the lore of the show, the Dead Sea Scrolls were included with these seeds of life and contain a manual for how to use the seed of life and the Spear of Longinus. All right. So now we can jump forward several billion years.
Okay. Time skip.
Unclear amount of time to about 4 billion years ago when first impact happens. So Adam's white moon, which is the name for his seed of life, lands on Earth in what would later become Antarctica. So as the Earth is forming and Pangea is breaking up and everything. Antarctica forms over Adam's white moon. But before it can reincarnate from its chamber of guff, Lilith's black moon also lands on Earth near Hakone, Japan, which is just west of Tokyo. Lilith's spear is destroyed in the process, in the crash landing, and Adam's spear activates and places him in suspended animation.
I think I want to correct one thing.
Sure, go for it, because I'm sure I'm wrong about a lot of stuff here.
Very tiny little detail. The black moon doesn't actually land near Hakone, Japan. It does land in Earth where, I don't think I know off the top of my head, wherever the proposed thought impact is that created our actual moon that floats around, crash landed, and then over the course of billions of years, tectonic shifts moved it to Hakone, Japan. Okay. So that way we can kind of keep with actual science history and make it work so that this is a Japan-focused story.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense. I buy it.
So Lilith's Adam's incapacitated, and Lilith's black moon, right? There are two different moons here. The primordial ooze starts spreading out of it, which is later going to be known as LCL, and it becomes the first life on Earth, Lilin, which are not exclusively humans. It's just life.
Right. Earth life as we know it. Dogs, cats, foxes, fish, people,
but
so on and so forth.
Ultimately leads to humans. So then we have a big jump to the year 2000. Along the way, the Dead Sea Scrolls are found. In real life, this happened in 1947. And in the show, I guess they never really say it happened any other time, so we just assume that's when it happened. It's found by a radical religious group called Zele. And I don't know exactly what point they might have changed their names along the way, but anyways, they're Zele. They have the Dead Sea Scrolls. They give out information that we would know in real life that they don't feel has anything to do with anything, but they're like the real good secret information about how to operate the Seed of Life and the Spear of Longinus. They take that information on their own. And so they're going to, in 2000, September 13th, 2000, they have what's called the Katsuragi expedition. They found Adam in Antarctica. And so they are going to go and do a contact experiment, which is even the idea of what a contact experiment is vague, but the most simplest way to put it is when the DNA of a Lilin touches something made from either Adam or Lilith.
Right.
As we're going to find here in a second when we get to explaining more of this kind of stuff. And so there's someone's a DNA from an unknown human donor. And so this could be like they placed some DNA on it or someone touched him or whatever. It's just the DNA touched him. That's all you need to know.
Right.
It touches on Adam and awakens him. And his body is destroyed in the process. There's a huge explosion. Antarctica's gone. And in this time, Captain Katsuragi, at that point, he's dead, and Misato is there. She's alive. She's got a big gash across her chest that fan artists always forget to draw, and it always bugs the hell out of me, Randy. It's like it's a defining character thing for her.
Come on, guys. You got to remember these details. That's not small details.
And Adam's soul is at some point captured or floats around, but it's in this Kaoru's comes about from Adam's soul. Not necessarily, maybe not the same day, but somewhere along the way. And Zele is in possession of him. Okay. Right. Randy, if I'm getting something wrong, jump in.
So just to elaborate on that, what we know of the files that are shared with NERV, the organization that we'll get to later, that Kaoru's birth date is September 13th, 2000, which would be the day of Second Impact.
Okay.
But then again, they've falsified records in the past. Who knows if that's true? But it seems, rather convenient because that makes sense. And I will also say for this contact experiment that was done, this was something that I had never really picked up on before, which is the Katsuragi expedition is down there. They found Adam. They're going to do these experiments that apparently Zele willfully and planned this contact experiment to result in exactly what happens, where there's an explosion, takes out Antarctica, the second impact, which was, from what I can kind of piece together, intended so that they could have their own instrumentality, which we'll get to later, without including the entire planet Earth. But things happen. It doesn't work out exactly as planned, and things go a little bit wild. So there's a lot of little mischief that's happening down in Antarctica in September 2000. But, we may never know exactly what's going on.
You're listening to this podcast right now and you're saying, Ken, that's still confusing. I don't get it. So we'll just quick recap. 2 aliens land on Earth, okay? One of them's deactivated. The other one leads to humans, okay? The humans find out about the deactivated alien and touch him. Antarctica's exploded. There. Is that simple enough for you?
That's just the mechanics of how it happens.
Yeah.
Can't tell you why. That's just what happens.
Yeah. So now is a section which I have a whole bunch of notes here. I wrote the road to Eva. Okay. So in 2001, Shinji Ikari to Yui and Gendo Ikari is born, as well as Asuka Langley Soryu to Kyoko Zeppelin Soryu and
unknown
some guy, some Soryu guy, or Langley guy, I guess, which is also a term for the CIA. So when people say like call Langley or whatever, they're talking about the CIA. So there might be some connections there. But anyway, she's German. So maybe not. All right.
German and Japanese.
Yes. In 2003, plans are underway to create the Evas as a means to initiate third impact, which will lead to a direct path to human instrumentality. Or
complementation, as some translations go with, rather than instrumentality.
Oh, so this is where you can avoid all of humanity. And so Seilei's ultimate goal is to further the evolution of mankind. They feel that mankind has become stagnant over tens of thousands of years, and they feel that instrumentality or complementation is going to be the next jump to where they need to get to. And
which, in essence, what that is taking everybody, compressing them into one being where they can fill in each other's weaknesses with different people's strengths. That basically, a complete, total, full being that has, no downsides, essentially becoming a god. But also, now there's no misunderstandings between people because we're all one thing.
Yeah. Seilei's crazy.
Yeah, a little bit bonkers.
So in 2004, Yui, who is Shinji's mother, she's a scientist working at Gehirn.
Yes.
Gehin, different pronunciations, different ways. So they're building an Eva. They've already made Eva Unit 0, which is...
And a bunch of failed units.
Right, which is built from Adam. And then for some reason, they make an Eva out of Lilith. Later on, Seilei will use this as a means to... They're going to be like, okay, screw the Adam idea. We're going to use Eva Unit 1 as our arc through to survive instrumentality. And
right.
With Shinji leading. They put their faith in him, I guess, and that he's going to be the leader. And a lot of people have a lot of sudden faith in Shinji at different points in the series, whether or not it's earned. So,
right. I mean, when you're desperate, sure. I'm counting on this 14-year-old with a lot of issues.
So Yui makes the first of only 2 contact experiments with an Eva. And this one made of Lilith, and she touches it and her soul is absorbed into the Eva and her body returns to LCL. Gendo does some experiments to try to restore Yui's body, but they fail and they result in Rei, who ends up with Lilith's soul. Again, it's one of these things. It's not exactly explained how that happens, but she does. All incarnations of Rei who are outside of, what's that, the clone room called?
Oh.
There's a term for it. It's like the chamber of bodies or something like that. But the Reis who exist outside of that room, of which there are 3, all have Lilith's soul.
Right. When one expires, somehow, through some means, the soul is transferred to a new empty vessel.
Yeah. Makes sense to me.
Right. Yeah.
Gendo continues to work towards instrumentality under Seele, but now his true goal is to reunite with Yui, basically become one with Eva Unit 1, just to be with his wife again. So to break Eva down into the most simple of terms is that it's a love story.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Gone horribly wrong.
Science messes up love, man. That's what happens.
In 2005, Kyoko, who is Asuka's mother, she is also a member of Gehirn, who, I don't know if they've become Nerve at this point, but at some point Gehirn becomes Nerve, and Gendo is probably right after Yui's death, I would think. Gendo is put in charge of Nerve.
I know that the changeover takes place later.
Okay.
Probably around 2008 or so, because I know that Ritsuko, after college, works for Gehirn.
Okay.
And it's shortly after that it switches over. And Rei 1 is, I don't know, probably like 5 or 6 at that point. So somewhere in the mid to late 2000s is when that switch over. But that's being pedantic.
It does seem like Rei's aging can be controlled. So
yeah.
Because she's not as old as Shinji or Asuka, from even a concept standpoint, but physically is, yeah. So, Kyoko makes contact with the Eva Unit 2, which is built of Adam. Mm-hmm. And in this experiment, for some reason, her whole soul is not removed, just the maternal aspect of her soul. And then trying to live after that is so devastating for her that she commits suicide, really in front of Asuka, which does a number on her.
For sure. And I think it seems like she's trying to at one point tries to convince Asuka to join her in
die
suicide.
with me, yeah. And there are implications that the rest of her was salvaged into Unit 2. So later, we're about to get into End of Eva, it's not just the maternal aspect of Asuka's mom that's in Eva Unit 2. It sure seems like it's all of her. But of course, even from that viewpoint, it's a maternal relationship. So you really don't know. It's something that's not ever stated. It's just insinuated. So now we are in the core of Eva now. Shinji's been sent off to go live with the teacher for a while. And now he has been called back because the angels are here. The angels are born from Adam after his brief reawakening, and they are starting to appear either to make contact with Lilith or retrieve Adam, whom they believe is in the Geofront, which we find out that the Geofront is actually a hollowed out Lilith's black moon. Though there are other Geofronts on Earth, but this one is not a man-made structure. They
excavated it. They found it, and they've only removed 8% of the material that was in there, and they're just in that little top part of that egg
to live in there. It's a cool place. It looks cool.
Yeah, it's real dope.
Rei, Shinji, and Asuka pilot the Evangelion to combat the angels. Rei, who was very fond of Gendo, and you come to realize that that's because she is of Yui, and it's essential that Rei agree with some of the plans that Gendo has. And so Gendo's really the only person he's warm with is Rei, because his end goal is he's going to need Rei later on.
Right, absolutely. Which is very tough for Shinji to deal with, seeing this estranged father who does not care for him at all, being very kind and warm with this very strange girl that he goes to school with.
However, after the Yashima incident or whatever it's called, Yashima plan,
Operation
that Rei starts to become fond of Shinji. And that continues on through the series, and she almost starts to, I would say, love Shinji, sacrificing herself
much as she can.
As much as she can, yeah. Gendo finds the remnants of Adam's body and incorporates it into himself so that at the right time he can make contact with Rei and trigger human instrumentality to reunite with Yui. So triggering this will allow him to enter Unit 1, and which is where his wife is.
So, again, a love story. Star-crossed lovers.
Eva Unit 1 absorbs an S2 engine from an angel, and these S2 engines are theorized to be where Adam gets his strength from and his power, and all of the different angels that have been coming have S2 engines in them. Whereas the Evas require they have to be plugged in at all times to operate. And if they're unplugged, you get a cool 5-minute countdown shot. It's the same every episode, and it's suddenly 5 minutes counting down, and you know that it's going to get real as we, get to the end of this whole ordeal. But Eva Unit 1, what's that?
Can I say one weird thing?
Of course.
When we're introduced to this whole battery system for the Evangelions, we're given different power modes that they can operate in. 5 minutes is in, I believe, like performance mode, and there's something like 16 hours of life support mode that you can be in. But they also say, I think it's like a minute and 40 seconds of like maximum power output mode, but they never use that mode. It's always a 5-minute countdown. So I'm just like, why did we bring this up if we never use it? The life support one we do get to, but never use that other one.
Yeah, the life support one is used when Asuka's at the bottom of the lake, right?
It's used when Shinji gets absorbed into a Dirac Sea by that one angel that's in the sky, but it's actually the shadow, which is like 0.1 millimeters thick, and it's actually a doorway to another dimension, and he's stuck there for about 16 hours.
Ava's good. I love it.
It's so good, you guys.
So I guess when Eva Unit 1 eats an angel and awakens, that is when Gendo decides. He doesn't do it right away, but I think that's when he decides that everything, the needs have been met, that he could trigger this. Because the Eva Unit 1 has to be able to survive off of a plug, so he can't trigger it until it's able to, and that happens once it eats the S2 engine.
I've never really put 2 and 2 together of why, like that's something he wanted. It just kind of, he seems to be happy at the fact that it's happening. So clearly it plays into his plan, which, I don't know, instrumentality on its own is kind of a very ill-defined thing of like what each person wants out of it and the different triggers that are done to do it. It seems you can do it a number of different ways, and they seem to all happen at the same time anyway. So it is what it is. But yes, the S2 engine, which is, just their power sources. Unit 1 gets one after eating another angel, and now it can operate without being plugged in, which is a pretty good thing. I wish my phone would eat an angel. That'd be great.
Little OP there. I don't know.
Yeah.
So they have been trying to find a fourth children, if you will. It went terribly wrong with the fourth candidate they had. In the anime, he loses a leg, and in the manga, he loses his life. But they get this kid sent over from Sele named Kaoru, and he is just like total, the whole package, right? He can perfectly sync with Eva's. He's confusing Shinji in sexual ways, and he heads to Nerve to go retrieve Adam's body and become himself again, because he is Adam's soul.
And with that, he can control AV Unit 2 without even being inside of it, which is pretty rad, in that he can control an Evangelion, that which is born from Adam, whose soul is hiding itself, in which, since Unit 2 and Asuka are kind of going through some stuff, Kyoko is kind of checked out of being in charge of Unit 2.
But he can't enter it, because there's already a soul in there.
Right. Can't fully take it over.
And so once he gets into Central Dogma and Nerve, which is where they've been keeping this creature nailed to a cross, who up to this point, I think you see it once before this, you're led to believe that this is Adam.
Right. Kaji shows it to Misato, saying that, they've been hiding something from you, and this is what the true reason for, and introduces it as Adam.
Right. But Kaoru gets there and realizes, no, this is not Adam. This is Lilith. And it's not ever explicitly stated why he does this, but after he realizes that he's been fooled, he just says, all right, Shinji, you can kill me. This is my choice. This is the most important choice you can make, and I'm making it. You can kill me. And then we get to one of the most iconic frames in all of anime, in which Eva Unit 1 holds Kaoru and it's just a still frame. No animation whatsoever, while classical music plays. I'm not sure the track that's playing, but
it's Ode to Joy by Beethoven.
Ode to Joy. Right.
I think it's about 1minute and 40 seconds or so of just a still frame, which I think pure genius, because Shinji, very confused by everything that's going on. Kaoru has been the only person that's kind of been warm and inviting to him in that sort of way. I don't know why he doesn't consider Misato, because she has been nothing but a great influence on his life. But we don't get to see him thinking or struggling with it. Is just from the outside, as we know, Shinji's going through some stuff right now.
It's really what's going on in your head is what is going on in Shinji's head in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's just like pure chaos of thoughts. Mm-hmm. Now, also what helps explain why this frame exists is that Eva was having tremendous budgetary issues going into its final stretch of episodes. Because I don't know if you've ever seen Eva before. It's extremely well animated. And they just ran out of resources along the way, and they had to make some cuts. And
there are 2 people in an elevator for an extended amount of time where no animation is done. We have that one still frame for a long time. You know, they're stretching their dollars. Their yen.
Yes, exactly. And you get to parts of episode 25 and 26 where it's just like sketches and just still frames moving around and unfinished works. And it's all, they use it in a seemingly intentional way, so that if you don't know what was going on behind the scenes, you're just like, wow, that was a really artistic ending. And it is. But there are reasons that led to that really being the only option of how to end it that way. But luckily, they made a movie to explain what is going on, because these episodes 25 and 26 that we just discussed are going on inside Shinji's head. Pretty much exclusively, right?
Yeah, as far as we know, it's all just completely internal.
Yeah, so episode 24 ends. Kaoru has just died. His head drops into the LCL. Mm-hmm. And then episode 25 starts saying, Human Instrumentality has begun. This is what's happening to Shinji. And that's where you are for the rest of those 2 episodes. You're never outside of it.
So you had experienced this with the Platinum Edition DVDs that ADV had put out. My first experience this, well, first of all, the first episode I ever saw was episode 5. I watched episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8 on a tape a friend had given me where he had recorded a bunch of shows, and this was DVD 2, which was those 4 episodes. And then about a year later, a different friend of mine, she had all of the VHSs. And how ADV did VHSs, you know, if you're old like us, you might remember cassette tapes for this. They're always black, right? They were the usual ones, except for Nickelodeon ones.
Orange.
Those were orange. ADV did white. All of their VHSs were white. Evangelion, white tape, white tape, white tape. The last tape, episodes 25 and 26, was black, which was a very exciting thing when I got that tape. Like, whoa, this is, good choice, ADV. Good job on that.
And that takes us into End of Eva, the movie which came out in 1997, I think. I think after GT it ended, so I don't think it will come up in the world of anime.
Right.
So, this is, I think, a pinnacle of anime storytelling.
Yeah.
On Halloween, I watched my favorite Halloween movie, which of course is Cowboy Bebop Knocking on Heaven's Door, which was produced in 2001, so 3 years after that series had ended. And I think that movie is really some of is a love letter to 90s animation, and really is like when I would say that era ended. But that era at its peak is the end of Evangelion.
Right, which I did not know this, but the announcement of Death Rebirth, which would eventually become End of Evangelion, was announced a month after the TV series ended. It was very quickly afterwards. So, I mean, they must have gotten funding or knew that they were going to be working on this big project, which is, exciting.
And it's a lot of big studios on here. It's Studio Bones, it's IG, Production IG. And they let you know that when you start up the End of Evangelion, there are like 12 production companies in here telling you, hey, we worked on this movie. Check this out.
Sega's in there.
Toei.
You know?
Everyone is getting their cut from the end of Eva.
Star Child. Trying to remember. Yeah, there's just so many.
Yeah, you'll be sitting there for like a good minute and a half of just company logos showing up. And Production IG is the best one because it's like a little 3D bug that hops around and everything. It's cute.
That's right.
So the movie starts off and it's one of the like hardest to sell scenes in Evangelion because it's Shinji. So Shinji, the entire series is someone, he's a teenage boy, and his hormones are going crazy, and he is just like willing really to show affection towards anyone that shows affection to him, right? He is incredibly sexually confused, and the one person who he felt he was becoming closest with, Kaoru, he just had to kill him, right? Mm-hmm. He found out not only that he had to kill him, but he had to kill him after he was betrayed.
Yeah.
And so Asuka's been out of commission for a while, and she's in a hospital bed, and Shinji is like, Asuka, help me, and he's shaking her, and her like hospital gown opens up, and you can't defend what happens here, but you can just try to contextualize it as he is a deeply hurt and confused pubescent entering into pubescency boy, and he pleasures himself at the sight. But maybe even pleasure's not the right word here, because I don't think he gets a single bit of joy out of what happens.
No.
And it's one of the like most iconic ADV lines where I don't like to curse on podcasts, Randy, but I'm gonna have to quote what happened. It's an iconic line. He looks down at his hand and he says, "I'm so f***ed up," right? And it's been parodied a lot in Dragon Ball GT when Piccolo looks down at his hand and there's like all that blood on his hand and everything. So that came out before End of Eva, so obviously it's different, but people look at that scene, and even me when I'm watching that's the first thing I'm thinking of, right? That's how iconic this moment in End of Eva is. And
absolutely.
And
it's a kickoff for a movie, that's for sure.
Yeah. And Seele decides like, hey, this is it. We're going to trigger human instrumentality. And Gendo's like, nah, it's not ready yet. We're not doing it. And they're like, no, we're going to take Eva Unit 1. It's ready. Shinji will be the lead, and we're going to trigger this. And Gendo's like, we're not doing this. And Seele's like, okay, well then what do they say exactly? It's like death will be our gift to you or something.
Yeah, something like that. Because he says, they bring up like, oh, we're going to go through with it. And he says that, life cannot come from destruction.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you're going to get destruction either way.
So then all of a sudden they start off with a technical assault on Nerv, which is to have the Magi of all the different countries who have because Nerv is also in Germany. I think they have a branch in the US.
And China.
Yeah.
And yeah.
They launch all of their Magi launch an assault on Balthazar, Casper, and Melchior. Yeah, so they launch an assault, and they're Ritsuko. So Ritsuko killed all the Rei clones, and so she's been imprisoned, or she's in jail, lockup, and they're like, well, we need the daughter of the lady who created the Magi, and so then Ritsuko comes, and she saves everyone, and because she stops at the last moment, and then Seele's like, well, we've failed. Yeah.
So I had to look something up because they use a term. She, of course, stops this hacking from happening by instituting a Da Nang B-type barrier, a 666 firewall. And I was like, that has to be something. Obviously, 666.
That's a good wireless router name. 666 firewall.
Yeah. But the Da Nang B-type barrier is what I assume to be a reference to the Da Nang barrier, which was a 500-meter wide no man's land designed to stop enemy infiltration built by the U.S. during the Vietnam War in the city of Da Nang. So I was like, okay. I just had to look that up. I'm like, that seems like a very specific term.
Right. Yeah.
So I have to look this up.
So Seele has now failed at their technical assault on Nerv Japan. And so they're like, well, then we're going to send it. This is going to become a physical assault. And they have now, Seele has all their ties in the Japanese government. that they are now sending the army in after
the
Nerve.
Japanese Strategic Self-Defense Force.
Yeah.
JSSDF for short. And I believe that it's kind of been, this Sele is this cabal that has been around since ancient times, and they're actually pulling the strings of things. I believe in some things it said like, no, they just actually are the United Nations. They kind of run all of these things. So yeah, they have their fingers in many stews. So of course they can just be like, well, send the military in. They follow our calls.
So when this starts happening, Asuka is in the hospital, and they're like, well, we can't. They're going to come after the kids because the kids can pilot these Evas. So we got to get Asuka safe. So they put her in Unit 2 and just send Unit 2 to the bottom of the lake, which is right outside Nerve headquarters, still inside the Black Moon, but just at the bottom of the lake, which she gets found like immediately anyways. And they knew that was going to happen, but it would be better than keeping her in the hospital. And so they're like, okay, well, let's get Shinji safe too. And then they're like, we don't know where Shinji is. And Misato's like, oh my God. And so they find Shinji, and he's like sitting in a stairwell or something. And Misato's like, okay, I'll go get Shinji myself. And so in the process of doing so, like everyone's dying, right? These army forces are killing everyone at Nerve. They're like making their way to the headquarters, but they can't blow up the whole place because they need the Magi still, right? So they can't just, and I don't know why they need them at this point.
I'm wondering, if they're going to be eliminating the pilots, if there's some sort of remote control that they can activate the Eva units using the Magi computers. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure, but for whatever reason, they still want that.
Yeah, so they don't, like the main guys at headquarters, they're all safe, and Gendo's like, all right, I'm out. I'm out of here.
I got things to do. Now's the time.
Yeah, Futsuki, you're in charge, and Futsuki say hi to Yui for me. He's like, he knows what Gendo's gonna go do. And so we're now on the Rei 3, who I guess she awakened when Kaworu went down to Central Dogma.
Something happened.
Yeah, she reawakened because they're like, all of a sudden there's another angel appearing, and it's Rei because they show Rei, and then
right.
So she's awakened as Lilith, and so she is standing down in the room where I guess where they have Lilith's body. She's just like waiting down there. And then
she was also in the room where all of her clones are and just looking at the decomposed bodies of herself, which is got to be a trip.
So she's not happy with, I guess, what's going on. And,
especially with Gendo. Yeah. Rei 2, very fond of Gendo, had like his old glasses that she would, hold and smile.
Rei 3
and
breaks
before
him.
Leaving, Rei 3 breaks him and then heads down there. So it's like, okay, she's got her own ideas of what is going to be happening.
Yeah, she's not happy. And so Gendo goes down there to talk with her. Meanwhile, Misato takes a fatal bullet on the way to go rescue Shinji, but she gets Shinji out of there, and Shinji heads off. And then Misato, right as she's dying, Rei appears, and then the whole place blows up. And the way I interpreted, because this is going to happen again with Ritsuko, and the way that Rei appears to everyone in Human Instrumentality is that is like everyone returning to Lilith.
Right.
That's the way I read
these
it.
Are the right. If it seems that there is some sort of pre-instrumentality where you can be reborn and be absorbed into the chambers of Guff with everybody else, even though the literal instrumentality hasn't happened yet. Yeah. So, Rei appears to those in that sort of form.
And watching this, well, we'll get to it in a second. So, now as this is all going on, Shinji's still on his way to Unit 1, but we've got a problem because Asuka's just awakened inside of Unit 2 and realized that it's her mother's soul inside Unit 2. And so all of a sudden her sync rate is back, and Unit 2 shows up and starts like busting everything up, throwing big battleships and everything. It's awesome. But then
so cool.
The mass-produced Evas show up. And this has like been Sele's like ace in the hole, right? That they have 9 of these mass-produced Evas, all with S2 engines, which I guess they've been collecting from the Angels that they have been defeating.
Yep, they're the first one that they got that was mostly intact was from the Oh gosh, which one was it? It was the one with the noodly arms things, I think. Or no, maybe whatever. It doesn't matter. They've been collecting them.
Yeah.
There's 9 of them. Initially, their plan was to have 13, but they only had 9 completed by the time the plan had to go off. So they're going to make do. What that means, what they could have done if they had 13, I don't know. But they only have the 9.
And so Asuka is fighting them, and then her umbilical cord gets cut, her power cord. And she's like, okay, she does the quick math, and she's like, all right, I've got 20 seconds for each one. Like I can do this, or however. And yeah, she does it.
She does. I had to look it up because it's the same in multiple dubs in the Japanese and in the manga. Asuka is from Germany and speaks German quite a bit. Mm-hmm. She says, I've got 20 seconds for each of you, and jumps forward to take out the first one, breaks its face, holds it above her, and like basically cracks it like an egg, and it just bathes her in blood. And she just says, Esta, which means first in German. So she's like, that's one.
If we really want to get down to it, Randy, about who best girl is, it's like,
dear.
Man, I always bounce between Asuka and Misato, but I really think it's Asuka.
There with you.
If I gun to my head, it's Asuka.
I probably just barely lean the other way and say Misato.
Yeah. Two sides of the same coin, you and I.
Right, exactly. But the point is, we both have the same top 2.
Yeah.
And it's a close choice for both of us.
Yeah. All respect to Rei.
Right.
And Mari, we'll get to Mari. She's enjoyable, but we're not there yet. So.
And I have a little thing for Ritsuko. There's something about Ritsuko I also really love.
Yeah. She was wronged multiple times.
Absolutely. Has her own issues that, she's still responsible for her actions, but yes, absolutely.
So Asuka is fighting these mass production Evas, and she's messing them up, and she beats all 9 of them. Mm-hmm. But they reactivate.
After throwing one of their swords, which turns into a Spear of Longinus.
Yeah, Spear of Longinus.
Which, totally wrecks her, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so they start, literally eating Asuka. They've now blown through her eye with the Spear of Longinus, and then they just start eating Unit 2, and in the process are eating Asuka as well. And it's just, really gory, and it's grotesque.
Yeah.
It's like crows going after a dead rat or dying rat or something, right? They just pick at it, and they're
yanking stuff out.
So gross. Yeah. So Gendo is down talking with
Rei.
And Gendo's like, okay, it's time. I have Adam in my hand here, or in this hand, my right hand, and it's time for us to go. And so he puts his hand on Rei's breast and pushes it through. And then moves his hand down, and then Rei blushes, and then I'm blushing because I'm like, I don't know about this. And then,
so unfortunately, I say this unfortunately, there is, of course, when one is voice acting, you might make a flub, or you might think of something funny and make a blooper. This is in the commentary for End of Evangelion on the Manga Entertainment DVD. They said, we don't have the recording of this, but when the original actor was playing Gendo, had his hand in her and was moving it down, the actor said, I knew I left my keys in here somewhere. And I'm like, I really wish we had that audio clip, but
you at least got the Spike Spencer meltdown in episode 26.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So yes, that whole thing happens because her AT field is weakening and can no longer hold her human form. Her arm falls off.
Yeah.
So.
And we also learned through Asuka what AT fields really are, is that they are and Gendo says too, they're the walls of the heart. So basically they're your ego or your super ego or something, but it's your sense of self. Right. The barriers that divide people to make them individuals. I believe Kaoru also talks about this when confronting Shinji in episode 24. Yeah. That it's the light of the human soul, basically your individual self and the thing that protects you from harm from others or, separates you. And it is something that the children or the Evas made from Adam can weaponize. Right. I don't think, does Eva Unit 1 ever weaponize an AT field or just deals with AT fields of angels?
What do you mean by weaponize in that?
There's a part where Unit 2 like throws her hand across and creates an AT field. Does Unit 1 ever do anything quite like that?
Well, I mean, he does. She, I suppose. Unit 1 is a woman, but the pilot Shinji, when there's that one angel that is falling from space, like he catches it using his AT field. Yeah. There's also right before that when he activates it, like it's standing kind of like, I don't know, in this weird power pose, and then the light changes and there's just an explosion and like buildings are moved out of the way from him powering up his AT field, which is pretty rad.
Yeah. In case you're pretty deep into this podcast, I haven't been including any screenshots. So there was no screenshot on the screen right now. You just need to watch the series and you just go through it. Yeah.
And when we bring these up, you will picture it because every image is very striking and will sear into your brain forevermore.
Every frame a painting, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So Rei is having none of this stuff with Gendo, and she says, "You know what, Gendo? I hope you didn't like having that hand." And Gendo loses his hand, just kind of like pops off, and
she grows her arm back by taking it
because she is now Rei's soul with Adam's body, and then she returns into Lilith's body. So for those keeping score at home, she is now Lilith, and Adam, but they don't ever tell you where Adam's soul is. Somewhere, I think Seele still has
Kaoru,
it. Right? But after Kaoru. Because there's a point where it seems like they put Kaoru back into Rei as part of the instrumentality.
Oh, right. I was reading something on this today that I was like, okay, that makes sense. Well, I mean, yeah, I suppose maybe there's just sort of some sort of quantum mechanic link between the physical form of Adam that Gendo had and Kaoru.
So we'll get into it a little bit more here. So Gendo just kind of falls on the ground and lays down. So Unit 1 has now been sent out. Shinji doesn't want to go out there, and he's hearing reports of Asuka dying and everything, and then Unit 1 moves on its own, and Shinji
to force him to get in.
Yeah, Shinji's like, is it this one Shinji realizes that it's Yui, or?
I think that he's learned this information already.
Yeah.
I want to say it was when Ritsuko is kind of giving the big information dump in 23 after Rei's dead and showing him where the bodies come from and how Evas are made and that, Yui is inside Unit 1.
So Shinji gets in the damn robot and he's like, okay, I guess I'm going to go help Asuka, not really having any understanding of how dire things are outside of where he's at. And so Unit 1 launches out, and the first thing that Shinji sees is the like tattered remains of Unit 1 and
Unit
2, my bad. And then he screams a blood-curdling scream and then cut to Xanatos. Yep. And now the time is here, or however it goes.
Which was so great. I was showing this show to a friend of mine in high school, and I had lent him the TV series, and he had watched the TV series, and he finished it and was like, Randy, I was so engrossed in the show, and those last 2 episodes was the worst thing I've ever seen. Why don't I get closure? And I said, aha, I can show you End of Evangelion, the actual. And he's like, great. So we sit down in my basement. We're watching End of Evangelion, the blood-curdling scream, cut to credits, and I go, and that's where it ends. What do you think? The fury that man at that moment, and I just let it go for like, just kidding, it's an intermission, we got the second part to watch.
It's funny, but there's not a whole lot more closure in the next part.
Not very clear closure anyway.
So Shinji is now having like some crazy breakdown, which I forget what they call it on the graphs, but they show you like his
Destrudo
yeah.
And his ego is breaking down to nothing.
And it's at this point that Rei like awakens and her giant body leaves Central Dogma, and like her hand passes through
Ibuki and everybody.
But then Ibuki like screams, and I'm always wondered like what was her sensation in that moment?
Yeah, exactly.
As Rei was moving through her, and Rey kind of like shows up and then puts her hands, and we're talking like they're in outer space now. And she puts her hands
in the atmosphere.
Yeah, in the atmosphere. And she puts her hands around Unit 1. But then this is when Sele is like, all right, this is it. Let's go. Let's enact the protocol, human instrumentality. Let's go. And so then the 9 mass-produced Evas make this shape. I think is this the Sephiroth?
They do multiple things. One of them is the Sephirothic tree, I believe. And then, there's another one that's just like a whole bunch of, that's like infinity symbols on top of each other. And then there's one that's a very far away shot when they're like in space. That's like a triangle thing with a bunch of branches. I've never entirely understood a couple of those, but yeah.
So I would guess that this was the ritual to put Adam's soul into the Rey body, Adam body situation.
I could see that.
Because it's right after this that Rey turns into Kaoru and is trying to like console Shinji and everything. And things just keep going from bad to worse, and Shinji gets wrapped up in this kind of like crucifix type thing, and then I don't know what better way to put this. A vagina shows up on Rey's forehead. Kaoru's turned back into Rey. Forehead, vagina, and then the crucifix gets entered into it. And then we kind of go into a series of events that is more similar to the TV anime. And then it's at this point that Come Susser Todd starts playing as instrumentality begins. And it's... everyone starts turning it. You'll hear a lot. People turn into orange jello, and
they get tanged.
They get tanged, and they're turning into primordial ooze. Some of them see something that will comfort them right before their end.
Except for Aoba, who just sees a bunch of Rays crawling towards him while he's under the desk screaming.
Yeah,
because I guess he has nobody.
Yeah,
poor guy.
He had Misato.
He plays guitar.
Yeah.
Well, Hyuga sees Misato.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Aoba sees nobody because like all we know about this guy is he does his laundry and he plays guitar.
Ibuki sees Ritsuko.
Right, who types on her laptop, "I need you," and then,
Sweet. In a weird, twisted, the world is ending type way. And Gendo has a...
And Fuyutsuki see Yui.
Yeah. Though it's a little bit more pleasant for Fuyutsuki. Gendo has a long conversation talking about how he failed Shinji, and then Yui like retreats into Unit 1. But this is all like a vision that Gendo's having, because Unit 1 is elsewhere at this time. And then Gendo's vision is that he's been excluded from instrumentality or something, but he gets eaten in half.
The top half of him. Yeah. And then the legs are apparently set back down.
The legs are left behind.
There's an interesting illustration, because I also read the manga portion of this today, is he doesn't get eaten, but there is the last shot we see of Gendo after this whole conversation. In this continuity, Ritsuko also shot him in the throat. But he's laying there, and it's a long shot of him still bleeding, still as a body, but now Ritsuko's clothes are empty and is just a puddle of LCL. So he is excluded, I guess, from everything that's happening here.
That is his punishment for everything.
Right.
It's just not good for old Gendo in this version of events, either two versions of events. Yeah.
Right. I mean, who knows, that maybe it was just his own sort of, I don't know, vision of what he deserves, but maybe he was also actually part of this whole thing. I don't know. It's just me thinking like he's got to have a happy ending, even though this guy is just a total jerk, a piece of dirt.
He doesn't.
I want him to at least get something.
Not in this series of events. No. But so then we're inside Shinji's mind again, and he is having like more of a continued breakdown. He's not able to handle the being combined with other souls. Right. He and Asuka clash right off the beginning, and then he starts yelling at everyone, saying that, they don't know him, and that he's like...
doesn't like their ambiguous smiles.
Yeah. Because he's, again, a super sexually confused boy. He doesn't know. It's like, what is a signal and what's not, and he doesn't understand anything. And And then some point along the line, he has the vision at the playground, or is that at the beginning of all of this?
That's very much at the beginning of him at a playground,
and then he's
playing
left
with
alone.
other children with that look very much like dolls.
Yeah.
And then left at the playground alone with the sandcastle they built, which is just Nerf headquarters.
Yeah, it's all very steeped in metaphor of what's happening. But then
the hills and the trees and it's like, all right, there's breasts, there's legs, so we are playing between a woman's legs here, I guess.
Yeah,
because the shape of the swing set and all that. Anyway,
there's always been a thing where people have told me that because of everything with Kaoru, that Shinji is gay, and I think it's much more. I think it's much more complicated than that. I think he is whoever will give him attention and love.
Right.
And that's what Shinji's drawn to. And that's what causes him so much strife in this vision that he's going through as instrumentality is happening. But ultimately, it leads to him and Rei kind of their naked bodies fused together and they're talking things through. And Shinji's holding on to Misato's cross, and he's starting to kind of calm down a little bit, and it's just like, hey, people can come back if they want. You don't have to understand everyone all the time. And whereas
it's such a great illustration of that, where they're on top of each other, but clearly their bodies are kind of intermingled because it's hard to tell where one ends and one begins. And when he looks at that cross and he reaches up and he puts his hand on her arm, not through it, and then pulls it out of him, it was just kind of like, okay, we're starting this separation where people are going to be individuals again. I think that was just a chef's kiss. Great way to show, okay, we are going to start undoing this.
Yeah. And so Shinji has been put in charge of this whole instrumentality because of Seele. He's the only one that can combine with Unit 1, really, to sync at this level. Rei has affection for him, and so Rei is helping facilitate Shinji as like the deciding factor in everything that's going on with instrumentality. And Shinji's like, okay, yeah, I want to come back.
Yeah.
Even though it sucks and it's a hard life and you're going to not understand people all the time, they're not going to understand you. It's like, we are individuals and I want to go back to that. And then he says goodbye to Yui, who is still in Unit 1.
Right.
And Unit 1, and she's like, Ava's can't be on Earth anymore or can't be here. And so she takes Unit 1 out into outer space. And the chambers of Guff have reopened, and the Black Moon is bleeding all the LCL primordial ooze back onto Earth. So everyone
can come back if they have the will to come back.
So given I think we'll talk about it later in case someone is for some reason watching these movies for the first time and then listening to us. I don't want to spoil future movies. I don't think it's literal in that like Fuyutsuki could just be like, oh, I want to come back. And then he just like emerges out of the ooze and walks us forward. I don't think it's that literal.
Why don't you think that? Because we clearly see that happen with Asuka.
We do, but why is it just Asuka and Shinji?
There's someone's got to start, and I don't know. Asuka always had a very strong will, so it makes sense.
I think it's because they're the only two that were Ava pilots. I mean, Rei and Kaoru were angels.
True.
Or far first ancestral race, and who knows what's going on with... Oh gosh, what's his name? Toji? Who knows what's going on with Toji? I mean, he's like kind of counts, but it doesn't really. Who knows if he really ever really piloted Unit 3?
Yeah, he put on the suit. We know that,
and he had to go through whatever kind of tests and everything. But yeah, so also one thing we do need to note in this that is incredibly important for how we're going to address the next movie is that as part of Lilith Rei letting Shinji return everyone, her neck splits open and her blood spews across the moon. That's actually...
And starts like a ring, Saturn has rings, but now Earth has a ring of blood around it.
Yeah, which could just be in the atmosphere and it will eventually fall down.
That's true. Yeah, that's very fair.
But and then Shinji looks over at Asuka and immediately starts trying to strangle her and then starts crying. as he's on top of her, strangling her, and then she says, "Kimochi na" or something.
Kimochi ga warui.
Yeah.
Which is, I feel bad. I feel sick. I feel disgusting. Yeah. We should also say that clearly a lot of time has passed where Shinji has been by himself. His demeanor has very much changed from mere moments ago where he was saying goodbye to Yui. He has taken the time to put together graves for people. Specifically, he's nailed Misato's cross to a tree.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of out of it. I mean, being the only human on the planet, like, I thought I fixed everything, and now I'm here by myself, and I guess I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah. That's it. That's the end.
That's the end of the movie. Just Kimochi ga warui, and then
for about 10 years, that was it for Eva. So we'll pick back up next time. We will be watching Rebuild of Evangelion 1.11. We're not going to go through all the different 1.00 because I couldn't even tell you what's different. I've only ever seen the 0.11, 0.22, 0.33, and then 3 plus 1.01. So I haven't seen the original theatrical versions of these movies. So we'll just be discussing the widely available versions that are out there today. So
that sounds good. Is there any... You don't want to speak about End of Evangelion anymore? You don't want to talk about what your thoughts are regarding that last scene? What it all is, what it means?
So I don't think humanity is coming back from that immediately, right? I think it's just like, hey, we're starting over. And Shinji and Asuka will eventually die because there's no nutrition anywhere. And... I mean, I guess there's still wood and plants maybe, but that can, who knows? So I think maybe they live together for a while and then eventually die, and then it's just billions of years pass.
What do you think about her showing up? And before she was, of course, in her plug suit and everything. She appears here in her plug suit, but her arm is bandaged, which was torn in half during the fight with the Evas, as well as she's got an eye patch or bandages over the other eye that was harmed. What do you think about that? Because a lot of people.
I had never actually noticed that until this watch through, and so it's like, it seems to me like Shinji doesn't see her until we see Shinji see her, unless he has bandaged her and then goes and lays next to her, and then he kind of has a breakdown and tries to strangle her. Maybe because she's not waking up and he feels alone or something. Maybe that's his way of waking her up. I don't ever wake me up that way. But.
Yeah, it's a very confusing scene, even with all of the context, to be like, okay, so why is this the way that this ends? Which is definitely a different way than how episode 26 ends.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's, one of the great things about it is it leaves people talking and thinking and conversing about it all these years later. Because, I mean, here we are, talking about it, recording this conversation. I don't know if we add anything more to the conversation and the wider discussion of Evangelion, but, it's always fun to...
I think maybe we helped walk people through some confusing things by going through some of the background lore and explaining what's going on in this movie. Because it really is... Yeah, we've said a lot of confusing things like chambers of guff and Destrudo waves or whatever, but I think what's happening is very straightforward. Aliens came to Earth, propagated life on Earth. One of the aliens was deactivated. Eventually, people found the deactivated alien, touched it, everything went to hell, and now competing people are trying to use these aliens to evolve the human race.
It's all pretty simple, just told in a complex, convoluted, and way that holds back certain information.
Yeah. Yeah, because for a long time, after End of Eva, it wasn't for a while before that PS2 game came out and all the classified information came out with it. And by the way, it was all aliens all along. There are hints, they do reference the Black Moon and the White Moon were left here for us by someone else, but there's hints throughout, but
never fully here's what it is, here's what they are, here's where they came from, here's why they're here, what these spears are for, and so on and so forth. There was one thing that we kind of skipped over. I'm not sure what your sort of layout for this is. I'm sure you wanted to bring things to an end, but
Freeform. I mean, we have some audience thoughts, but other than
that's
that,
true.
Freeform.
Things that still confuse me or that I haven't found a very clear answer for is that the spear is obviously something very important. It can pierce the divine, which is why it can go straight through AT fields. I mean, just that's how that technology is set up to work with Adam and Lilith and these seeds of life. But during the course of the TV show, in order to defeat one of the angels, Rey has to go get the spear and chuck it into space to take out that angel. And then it enters, orbit. It, eventually crashes into the moon. And then once Unit 1 sort of activates completely, loses all the restraints, the core is exposed, randomly, the spear pulls out of the moon and flies straight towards Unit 1. And it's like, okay, did Unit 1 voluntarily call it? Is it just activating of like, oh, there's a thing of seed of life that's activated and it shouldn't be. I got to go down there and stop it. What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Yeah, that seems like a good way to think about that. Because, we didn't even talk about the sphere of Longinus flying out of the moon or anything.
Yeah, it just happens, and there's no real fanfare to it of like why. They're just like, it's coming, it's here.
It does. And then it seems like it
happens.
The way it happens, it seems like an orchestrated thing by Sele, because they need this to happen so they can continue that next phase of instrumentality where the 9 Evas make a shape around.
They were very upset after that angel was destroyed at Gendo for losing the spear, because it was something that they needed. One assumes for their scenario for instrumentality. But yeah, it didn't seem like it was something that they initiated. It felt much more of a reaction to Unit 1 awakening. So it's like, okay, did Yui do this? Is this just what the spear does? We also didn't even talk about like how these replica spears work. How are they made? Anything like that. They just have them. It turns out, like, okay, and they work the same. So I don't know why they needed the original.
It's just got to be Dead Sea Scrolls stuff that they don't ever reveal.
That's true. Yeah,
or maybe which I think is stuff that Sele hadn't deciphered, which is why they were so mad about the spear being on the moon. Or
yeah, man, it's exciting stuff for that, because I know that humans in real history discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I don't think that it was like revealed to people like what they actually were until after the series. So I think maybe it was kind of going off of that of like, oh, what could they say? Well, what if it was the manual to like this, and kind of told the events of the future, like here's what's going to happen, the leading up to instrumentality and things like that. Genius way to pull from what was on people's minds at the time.
Yeah. All right. I would say the Dead Sea Scrolls probably rejuvenated interest being in Eva, because it was definitely the first time I probably ever heard of it. And then I was actually disappointed when they revealed that it was just like some nothingness. I was good never knowing what these were.
Yeah. I would have loved the mystery, guys. Yeah. That would have been way better.
I don't even remember what they were, but it sure as hell not an interesting seed of life situation.
Right. I think it was just like, I don't know, some copies of the Bible. We're just like, hey,
I can get that for free. I don't
right. I got an app for that.
Yeah. So I did put a call out for some thoughts here, Randy, and we'll just, do you have the tweet pulled up, or?
I don't have it currently pulled up myself, but I certainly could.
I don't think anyone replied to the Blue Sky. We're just doing, normally when we're doing We Got a Podcast, we would cut all this stuff out of us talking and pulling the tweet up and everything, but we're just going to leave this in. So a little bit pulling the curtain back here on the Ava edition of We Got a Podcast here. And it doesn't look like anyone responded to the Blue Sky, but we do have some thoughts here on the Twitter.
Yes.
So
I got it up, by the way.
I'm going to go a little out of order. We're going to go with the most recent tweet first, which is from JakePay at JPay16. Right. So I asked if anyone had any pressing thoughts on Death True 2 and the End of Ava. And Cage did not write in.
Cage, get on it. If you haven't watched Ava yet, Cage.
But Jake
and you're listening to this.
But JakePay did write in and said, never seen it. I surely hope you hadn't gotten to this point of the podcast without having seen them first. especially after me warning you halfway through this thing not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But even so, I think you'll get a kick. Maybe you'll get a kick out of watching it now after having listened to us talk about it. And you'll be like, oh, okay, I see how this was that or the other. Maybe you'll be like the first person who watches End of Eva and you're not confused.
Yeah, you just get it. You're like, okay, no, I got the cliff notes beforehand. I know what's happening.
Randy, you want to take this next one from Julie?
Yeah, I will. From Julie YBM. The End of Evangelion is my favorite film of all time. The sound direction, music, acting, sound effects is impeccable. The animation and the directing is just insane. The film forces you to confront aspects of yourself you might not want to and forgive yourself. A special film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched Evangelion at a young age. I got introduced to it when I was Shinji's age. I was 14. I watched the rest of it. No, I first saw it when I was 13, saw the rest of the TV series when I was 14, saw End of Evangelion when I was about 15 or so. Yeah, challenging watch at that age, but definitely had an effect.
I feel like as I've gotten older, especially talking about how I watched this when I was in college for the first time. And watching it now, I'm just like really into the lore of everything. And so I'm not as emotionally devastated by this kind of stuff as I was before, but I will tell you, I cried like a baby at the end of Eva 3.0 plus 1.01. We'll get to that and why I think that happened. But I think with this one, I'm not devastated. So have you ever seen Devilman Crybaby?
I saw like the first 2 episodes and then I didn't get a chance to watch the rest.
I'm not going to go into specifics of what happens, but it is another series where everything goes to hell at the end of it. And I feel like I'm becoming drawn to that kind of story where things start off.
Have you read Berserk?
No, and I'm waiting for it to finish first.
Fair.
But I have come to like these stories where everything starts off rather innocuous, and then by the end of it, hell on earth has been unleashed, and there is no going back to the way things were before. And so I'm just kind of getting into twisted storytelling like that. And so I'm not as like devastated or in need of like therapy or anything, having watched Shinji go through this terrible thing. To me, the most haunting thing in the movie is Shinji seeing Unit 2 and screaming.
Yeah, that is rough because, what you said before, we both like Asuka. Yeah. And, we learned through the series that if you are synchronized with your Eva, that you feel the sensations that the Eva feels. Yeah. And at that point for Asuka, first the spear, she is more synchronized with her Eva than she ever has before, likely hundreds of % in the synchro ratio. And getting stabbed through the eye, we see it manifest
her eye bursts open, yeah.
She's, pulling on the sticks as the blood is just gushing out. And then, of course, she's never activated Unit 2 outside of its normal operating capacity, but it's after getting hit by the spear that then it reactivates on its own, as Evas are sometimes want to do. So clearly she is still synchronized with it. And then it's when, she's go
disemboweled and
right. Exactly. So it's like, okay, even more disturbing is that she got to feel all of it, which is horrifying.
And we never see Rei appear to her, but we have to assume it happens.
Reading the manga, there are some differences. Shinji makes it to the surface to help her fight before they kill her, which is interesting. So they're kind of fighting back to back. And then as instrumentality is happening, Asuka was never eaten, consumed, or whatever. So Rei does appear to her as, I believe, her mother. And then she, gets turned into LCL inside the plug. So yeah, there's that.
Can I just say I like Shinji a lot more in the manga than in the anime?
He doesn't do the hospital thing.
Yeah.
in the manga, I'll tell you that.
But he just seems like more agency. He has more agency in the manga. Like there's even a part where he's pissed off at Gendo and he like leaps over the table and punches Gendo in the face. And you're like, this is not anime Shinji at all.
He gives me 2.0 vibes, which we'll get there.
Oh yeah.
Eventually. But
he's got more of a mouth on him and
yeah, absolutely. Much more agency. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Jacob Sawyer writes in and says, I have always wondered how they got the souls of relatives into the cores of the Evas. Also, what is the Chamber of Guff? Looking forward to this. So, first of all, thank you for looking forward to this special podcast that we're doing here. Mini-series podcast. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a Tenchi one in the future. We'll go through the Tenchi OVAs, but I don't know. We'll see.
Whoa.
Anyways.
Ken, you answering my wishes.
So how they got the souls in the cores of the Evas was accidents.
Yeah, well, accidents, quote unquote, because many feel, and I feel, that Yui did it on purpose. She knew what Seilei's plans were, and in some information, we learn that she potentially is the relative of a Seilei member.
Yeah.
So that's her connection to it. She knows it's going to happen, and she knows that they're building Eva to be this bridge to the future that can save humanity and specifically save her son.
Yeah.
She knows that Seilei knows what she knows and that her life is in danger.
This is all expressed in a director's cut scene that's in Death True 2 with Fuyutsuki, right?
Yeah, that's in there. It's also stuff in, that was added to the episodes for the director's cuts. And then also there's that short scene in End that's them on that one day where it's her and Fuyutsuki and Shinji. So she is going to, the only way to protect her son from here on out, because she's probably going to be murdered by Seilei, is to partake in this contact experiment and be the one inside Unit 1 to protect him. So it's like, okay, I don't think that was a mistake. I think that was very much on purpose. Unit 2 is much more of a, hey, I think, is this how this works? Let's try and put a pilot in here. And then, oops, it gets sucked in because, I don't know, they're empty vessels. I'm sure they crave to be filled with a soul.
Well, the difference is that Unit 1 is made of Lilith and Unit 2 is made of Adam. We don't know what the contact experiment situation was for Unit 3.
Or Zero.
Although it's implied to always be dummy plug. Is there an actual soul in Unit 0?
So
or is it just
in the wiki, there is a long thing of what is in Unit 0? Is it...
So, and when we say the wiki, we are talking about Ava Geeks wiki, which is a pillar of information in Ava, not the fandom wiki Ava, which is also out there. But if you want to get into the Ava wiki scene, get to Ava Geeks. That's where it's at.
Right. There's the theory that it's Ritsuko's mother, because she was killed by Rei 1, or no, she killed herself after killing the first Rei.
Oh, and that's why she tries to kill Gendo.
Right, but it's not. It's not actually. They're like, here's what one of the theories is, and then here's the reasons why it's not. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's debunked. It's likely that it just doesn't have one, which is why it's difficult to control. But since Rei is sort of a special case, the other one is that it's Rei 1. So Rei 2 being the one we see throughout the series. And then, of course, when Unit 0 gets exploded to try and save everybody else, that's kind of the recompletion of Rei. And I can't remember,
Rei 3.
Yeah.
So two parts of Rei's soul,
right?
Basically, and that's why they couldn't awaken, maybe.
Right. Exactly. So, and I mean, Unit 0 is also a prototype.
Yeah.
But I think I can't remember because it goes through multiple ones. Like, here is the one, and here's why it can't be debunked, and why it's probably this one. And I think it's Rei 1 that's in there.
That makes sense. I like that.
Yeah.
I buy it.
Right. I mean, we do know that all of the students at Shinji's school do not have mothers. So one assumes that all of their souls were harvested to be saved, to be put into the cores, which is what whenever they're talking about, we reconfigure the core for this pilot, because they do switch pilots for units here and there, is basically, let's try and move the soul or something, or try to configure it so it acts like the soul that was in there. So
that is one thing that's revealed towards the end of the series, is that everyone at Shinji's school is more of like a candidate program.
Right, exactly. Yeah. We meet Kensuke early on, who's like, "Oh, you're like me. I don't have a mom either." And then Toji has a dad and a sister, but doesn't have a mom. And it's like, okay, nobody there does. Hikari doesn't have a mom. She's like, I guess the only thing we really know is she's the one that does the cooking in the family. So it's like, okay, so she doesn't have a mother.
She's the class rep.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, nobody there has a mom. They're all candidates to be used in case, like, hey, we got another Ava. Let's pop one of these kids in there. They can handle it.
So I hope that answers. That's how they got the souls in contact experiments.
Yeah. As confusing as those can be.
And so the Chamber of Guff is where all the souls come from and where they go. Mm-hmm. And so when they say the Chamber of Guff is opening, that is everyone entering back into basically the seed of life, going back in to be collected. And this, I'm talking about, like, I did the most cursory look at this page on the Ava Wiki, is that it comes, Guff is body in Hebrew, and in Judaic lore, it's like the room of Guff or chamber of Guff is where all souls that we have originated from and all souls waiting to be born are.
Which is referenced by Ritsuko in the 23rd episode when explaining how Rei works. She says that the chamber of Guff was empty. There were no souls left. So we had to put somebody else's in here, which is, Lilith, Yui, this whole thing of, putting a soul inside of Rei.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, does that mean that there's no more children being born because there are no more souls?
Well, no, you're reincarnated, I think, is the
well,
idea.
If the chamber is empty, there's no souls going back in to come back out. I don't know. She just says when, talking about the construction of Rei that the chamber is empty. There's no more. So it's like, okay, interesting. Unless this was just her waxing poetic and philosophical about, the difficulties they had and all this happening and all the things that they've gone through.
Well,
I don't know. Ritsuko is going through some stuff.
All comes down to how young is Toji's little sister, because that would be the youngest character in the series.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how old is Pen Pen? Because Pen Pen
I was thinking about saying him. I'm like, nah, I don't want to make a joke here, but you did, and so that made me feel
That's not a joke. That's serious. He's also of Lilin, so
that's true. When I did show this to another friend in high school, we were halfway through the show, and he's like, I have a theory where this is going. I'm like, all right, cool, lay it on me. He's like, Pen Pen's behind it all. Like, all right. And then we got through the whole thing, and he's like, you want to know who came out of that unscathed? Pen Pen. And I'm like, oh no, he's right.
We only very briefly see Pen Pen too, and it's in a vision that Shinji's having when he and Asuka are arguing, I think.
Oh yeah, that's right, because the coffee gets broken, whatever, and he's there in the doorway, just like, oh shit.
So so that means Pen Pen was in Instrumentality with them. So
that's true. That's fair. It could all just be a vision. I don't know.
Well, Randy, I could talk Ava all night long, and we've gone about like 3 times as long as I thought we were going to. We've gone like a full normal episode of We Got a Podcast talking about GT here, but we're talking about Evangelion, and there is more to come. So the way these are going to release is basically as Randy and I find the time to record them, and then as I find the time to edit them. So they're not going to take the place of our normal episodes. They're going to be kind of like additive too. So if you want to watch these and want to listen to them, great. If not, the other stuff's going to be coming out on schedule as normal. These will just be irregular in release. I guess I'll try to make them as regular as I can, but no promises, especially because tons of video games are coming out and we're headed straight into the holidays. So I think we can all probably just definitively spare the time for GT. To go through with this when we don't want this to get in the way of that. So we're going to continue doing this, and this will probably take us through the rest of this year, maybe into next year. My idea, Randy, of how I was envisioning doing this is, of course, we did Death True 2 and End of Eva here, because I think it feels right to pair those two. I don't think we could talk about just the recap movie by itself.
No.
I'm thinking we'll do 1.11, 2.22, and then we will do the 2 specials together, which take place between 2.22 and 3.33.
So you want to do the first 2 rebuilds and the specials as one episode for this?
No. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Let me recap for you and the audience.
Yes.
1.11, its own episode. 2.22, its own episode. The 2 specials together, one episode, which I think will be particularly interesting because, Randy, you and I have not seen those yet. Because
have not, no.
Those were Japan only and are on the 3.0 plus 1.01 Blu-ray.
Yep.
So we have not seen them yet. We're saving them for this.
Yeah, I just got it in the mail 2 weeks ago, and then I think that's what kicked this off, because I was like, I just got these. I'm going to finally watch these specials, and you said, actually, do you want to do a rewatch with me, and we'll throw the specials in there? I'm like, well, I was going to watch those tonight, but I guess I'll wait.
Yeah, so I've taken that from you.
Yeah.
So that, I don't know how much they're going to be, but that might be a shorter episode, but we're going to do just those by themselves, because I guarantee you 2.22 is going to be such a meaty discussion, and 3.33 is going to be such a meaty discussion that they need to be their own separate thing. So we'll do those, and then we'll do 3.33 by itself, and then of course we'll cap it off with 3.0 plus 1.01, which should bring us to a total of 6 episodes in this mini series of a podcast here. So
yeah,
that's about where I'm at.
That sounds exciting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, Randy, unless you have anything else, I think we'll go ahead and give them the rigmarole here at the end.
I think that's basically it. Although I would like to pitch, and this is just something that you can think about, is we're covering these movies that one day we go back and we do the TV series.
Okay, I think we get dug in on that one.
That could be interesting. I could be into that.
It's
okay. That's all
That's
all I had.
We'll put that one in the maybe column. We'll get to that. So, Randy, where can people find you?
You can find me at saver_breaker on things. I mostly only post on Threads, but I might post some things here and there in other places, but you can find me there.
Yeah. And of course you can find me at Detective X on Twitter, at Detective X on Blue Sky, at, I think it's The Real Detective X on Threads, but I haven't posted on Threads and who knows how long. So, no thanking Rifty Beats this time, but thank you to Rifty Beats for our main podcast. We really appreciate that. I've just included some Wonder Swan and Game Boy music in this one for this episode. So thank you to Wonder Swan and Game Boy, I guess.
Yeah.
Hopefully we don't get content claimed on that. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you review, subscribe, tell your friends, watch our GT review podcast. We've really been enjoying doing those. And we just finished Baby, and we're kicking it off. We're going into some interstitial stuff, and then Super 17 and the Evil Dragons, and then we're going to have to start figuring out regular episode ideas after that. So thanks, as always, for watching, guys. Catch you, Matinator.
Bye.